advisor for primary years, and also Rebecca Earnshaw, who is the director of Voice 21. The agenda for today's webinar is that each of our panelists will have around half an hour to present, and we can take questions during their time slots. And then if anyone has any sort of final questions at the end of the webinar, then we'll take those then as well. So if we jump straight in, I'm going to hand over to Jonathan Wright from ICANN. Hi, Jonathan.
Hello. Gosh, there's a scary photo.
I will make you the presenter. You'll have a little invitation on your screen now.
Okay. My screen has disappeared.
There we go. Yeah,
there we are.
You can see a PowerPoint.
Right. Sorry, am I showing the PowerPoint?
Yeah, that's it. Just started.
Can you see that okay? Excellent. Okay, well, welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jonathan Wright. I'm a communication advisor with ICANN and a primary teacher by background. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about some key strategies for using to develop communication skills in the classroom. And this is aimed mainly, but not solely, at primary school staff. I know we've got some secondary staff as well, and the strategies can quite easily be adapted for secondary situation as well. You should, I hope, be able to get a copy of the slides after this presentation. Okay, so who are we and what do we do? ICANN is the Children's Communication Charity, and that's our mission statement. Basically, it's all about supporting children with speech, language and communication needs, as well as developing strategies for communication skills for all children in mainstream school as well. There's a quick slide about what we do: raising awareness, providing information, training and interventions that we deliver, and we also run a couple of specialist schools around the country for children with complex speech, language and communication needs. So just some quick background for you. I don't know how much people know already, but generally across the country about 1 in 10 children have speech, language and communication needs that are long-term and persistent, which may be linked to or separate from other forms of special educational need. But we also know that a higher proportion of children, possibly up to around 50% of children, have delayed language skills. And this presentation really is about strategies for supporting those children and the whole class to help them catch up and develop their communication skills. We know that there's a strong correlation between language skills and living in areas of deprivation. Although, of course, just because you live in an area of deprivation doesn't mean that you will have delayed language skills. But we know there's lots of research out there to say that developing language skills can help, particularly in all areas of attainment and child development. So we know, for example, that vocab at the age of 5 has been found to be one of the best predictors of outcomes for children in more deprived backgrounds to be able to improve their outcomes in later years. Ofsted, for example, 2012 report, Moving English Forwards, they talk about the importance of speech and language. Speech comes before both reading and writing. The earlier that all children develop confidence in their speech, along with an extensive vocabulary, the more likely it is that they will be able to improve their overall competence in reading and writing. So what can we do? Well, here we go. 4 basic key strategies to be used across the classroom. You can use them in any lesson, with any activity. And with some of these, it may well be a question of building on strategies that you're already using, or perhaps using them with a bit more purpose and maybe more widely in your teaching. So hopefully you won't feel that these are absolutely brand new ideas, but the more you can do to build on them, the better. Okay, so active listening and comprehension monitoring. What's this all about? It's a fairly simple strategy. A lot of schools, especially in the younger classes, reception, Key Stage 1, we talk about the basic skills for good listening. So we tell the children to do good sitting, good looking, thinking about the same thing. These are essential skills, and if we develop them further, we can build it into active listening. Now, active listening helps children in a variety of ways. It helps them to develop their self-awareness, and it helps to develop more independent learning. And we know from research into the most effective strategies that developing metacognitive skills can have a high impact for a relatively low cost. It's also recognised as good practice. So, for example, specialist SLT Maggie Johnson, I don't know if any of you have come across her at all, she's published quite widely on the theme of listening and attention skills. And it's about creating an ethos within the school where it's acceptable not to know, and teaching children how to monitor their own understanding. It's also something we built into our own intervention programs. So thinking about communication in the classroom, children need to understand, they should be able to understand what people say, and if they don't, it might not be their fault, provided they're showing the good listening behaviours, which is why they're important to establish from the outset. It may well be that adults often use language which is too complex. The question is, how easy is it for children to ask questions when they don't understand? Some children may not recognise that they've not understood, so asking them for their version of what you've just said will help you. The adult can then rephrase, simplifying the language where necessary. So if you say, so tell me what you have to do, it's better than just asking, do you understand? Some children, they know they don't understand, but they don't know what to do about it. So this is where the next bit around comprehension monitoring comes in. If you teach the children and model phrases that they can use, this will be really helpful. So on the screen now are a number of just simple phrases that you can teach the children. I would recommend that you introduce them one at a time over a period of several weeks at least, and give children the time to get used to using them at the appropriate time. And again, a whole school approach will help, perhaps with more the more detailed level of questioning. So, you know, picking out a particular word, if someone uses an unfamiliar word, to be able to pick that out and say, sorry, what does that mean? That's quite a high level skill. And you know, maybe those could be built in later on, upper Key Stage 2, moving into secondary possibly as well. Some children may well be too anxious to be able to ask for clarification in front of the whole class, so they need to know that their questions will be received positively. So it helps if adults stress how useful and clever it is to ask questions, and admit that sometimes the misunderstanding is there, as in the adult's fault, because they didn't explain things clearly enough. And this is all part of creating a communication friendly or communication supportive environment. Okay, so that's the first one. Any questions so far?
At this point, I'm just going to do a sound check for Anne-Marie Merrifield, who's just come on. Anne-Marie, can you speak? Hello? Anne-Marie, you've joined us from St Edmunds, and I've just unmuted you, but I can't hear you. I don't know if you can speak. Okay, I'm going to send you a message explaining how to ask questions, but if you've not got a working mic, if you want to ask any questions by typing in the questions function, you're welcome to.
Okay, shall I crack on?
Yeah, do carry on, Jonathan. No one's got any questions.
Great. There'll be further opportunity for questions at the end. Okay. So what else? Vocabulary. Children, it may sound obvious, children need words in order to communicate. And as I mentioned earlier, the importance of vocabulary is that we know it has a big impact on later attainment in education. So also, if we teach children strategies for learning words, as opposed to specific words, we know this will have wider applicability. And vocab and developing strategies can be used in any subject across the curriculum. We also know that focus on what we call tier 2 or process type words will be more relevant to children. So these are words like discuss, evaluate, describe, summarize, the sort of words that we quite often use in learning objectives. They're not covered as kind of tier 3 words, topic specific words, which we put on our planning sheet, so we know that we have to teach the children, and they're not tier 1 words that are sort of everyday vocab, table, chair, scissors, whatever. So they're useful right across the curriculum, and very often children don't really know what it is we're asking them to do. A bit of research that I'm involved with at the moment on an intervention for children at Key Stage 2 with delayed language skills, where we've tried teaching them these words, or some of these words, and what we found is that the TAs and the teachers using them, they said it's really difficult teaching the children these words, but we know we use them in class all the time, so we know they're useful. So with this grid that we're looking at here, word magic, this is taken from the communication cookbook and from our various interventions, and it draws on strategies used in research into teaching vocab. So the first thing is that we have 2 ways of learning, remembering, using words. One is via the meaning, the semantic route, and the other is via the phonological makeup. We also know that it helps children to remember words if we can make links with existing knowledge. So the more we hear a word being used and know things about it, the easier it will be to learn it and recall it. So, for example, the way this word magic chart might work, if we take a very basic example, we're going to teach the word pineapple. We put a picture of a pineapple or even a real pineapple in the middle of the grid, and we just work our way around the questions, talking with the children and eliciting ideas from them as much as they know about it. So can we describe it? It's spiky, it's got green leaves, etc. What do we do with it? We eat it. Where might we keep it? We might keep it in the fridge or whatever. So you go around. The final box, the anything else, would be for things about the word from the phonological side. So pineapple, what does it start with? How many syllables does it have? Yeah, a pineapple. It's got the word apple within the word. Things like that. So you go around the group that you're working with, and you go around the questions, building up as much knowledge as you can, sharing that knowledge about your chosen word. Okay. So it doesn't have to be something, a physical object. You could, as I said, focus on these tier 2 process words. So if you had the word accurate, can you describe it or can you say what it means? Well, it's to do with getting things right. The opposite might be doing things roughly. Where might we see it? Where might we use it? We have to be accurate when we are measuring. And that sort of thing, and then the children might remember times when they were doing some measuring, whether it was cooking, baking stuff, or in maths or whatever. And so working around the questions, the children build up their knowledge of things about the word, and also they hear the word being used loads and loads, which will help them to remember it. Okay, so that's a little bit on vocab. Narrative skills, storytelling. Really important skills for sharing news, for creating fictional stories and being able to explain incidents. Children at school are asked to draw on their storytelling skills every day. What happened at playtime? What did you do at the weekend? And so on. Being able to tell stories verbally gives a great foundation for being able to write them. Children won't be able to write well-formed stories if they can't tell them verbally. So this relies on a whole range of different skills, which you might like to think about if you just quietly to yourselves now, just have a think. what skills do children need to be able to tell stories? Well, hopefully you've come up with some of these. It's more than just a string of sentences. They need to have a structure to what they say so that it makes sense. They need to set the scene. They need to talk about who was there and what happened, and so on. So there's loads of skills involved. What we can do to support this in the classroom, provide a structure, okay, starting at the simplest level, just talking about stories need a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then moving on within that structure, we teach the key parts, key ingredients. So when we start out a story, we need to include who, when, and where. We need to talk about what happens, and then some sort of conclusion, how does it end, and so on. If you can tie this into, maybe you've got existing methods for teaching writing. I know a lot of schools use something called a story mountain. Here we've got a picture of a pathway. Anything like that, anything to help visualize it, going from the start, working towards something, and then an end point. So if we start by training the children in recognizing if all the components are there. So if you give them a simple story and then say, what's missing? What have I forgotten? Did I tell you who was in the story? Did I tell you when and where it happened? That sort of thing. So they can learn to identify whether they've got them all, whether all the components are there or not. And then you can do that sort of group brainstorming of a story. So take some suggestions for who the character that might be in a story. It could be themselves, it could be a member of their family, it could be some celebrity, it could be a wizard, an alien, whatever. So then you, as a group, you choose one of those characters, and then you do the same thing for when might it have happened, where might it have happened, what happens in the story, and so on. So as a group, you can use the children's suggestions to show how you can build up a story. Okay, so I hope that's clear and given you a few ideas to develop just spoken language, oral storytelling skills. Moving on then, supporting group work. We know that group work is a lot more effective for the children and for individual learning when children are taught the skills required for working in a group. Lots of research out there. If you do an internet search for Neil Mercer, M-E-R-C-E-R, he's written extensively on the impact of teaching children group working skills. So with all of these, it's about giving a structure, starting out with controlled practice, and then moving to more open-ended tasks. So a simple one that I know a lot of schools use already is paired work. So you've got a minute, talk to your partner about such and such. If you make the questions, the task for those pairs quite specific and short, it helps them to know they've got something specific to talk about, and then also they know they have to feed back on it. So you've got 1 minute to find out 3 things about your partner, and that's it, and then they know they have to feed back on those 3 things. The more specific you can make it, that helps to keep them focused and on task. Okay. Role cards, giving, if you're talking in a slightly larger group, 4 or 5 children, give each child a specific role in the group. So one would be the group leader, one might be a coach to support each other, one might be a helper, and so on. You would possibly want to explain and give children the practice at each of these roles individually, and then gradually over some time build up so that you're using all of the roles within the group at the same time. And then just to finish off, I've just got a few other sort of structures that you may have come across before, but they're good ways of structuring activities. So we have jigsawing. So we've got groups of 4 children set up as their, what we're calling here, home groups. They then have to work on a specific aspect. So each child within the group has a specific job to do. They go away in their expert groups and do some research, and then they come back to their home groups to share that information. So it gives each child a reason for going to the expert group, and also when they come back to the home group, it gives them a role because they've got some information which the rest of their group hasn't, so they need to share that. So for example, what this might look like if they're working on a presentation, let's say on the rainforest, then the expert groups, group 1 might be researching things about vegetation in the rainforest, and group 2 looking at homes, 3 animals, group 4 transport, for example. So they do some research on that, and then they take it back to their home groups so that they can share everything they know about those 4 topics within the rainforest. Okay. Snowballing, starting with your pairs. So each of the circles here represents a child. So you're starting off with a paired activity, then you put 2 pairs together to make a 4, 4s together to make an 8, and so on. This is a good kind of structure for when you're trying to move a group or a class towards a group decision. So issues, things that you need to discuss, and then say feedback to school council, for example. So that's useful for that one. Concentric carousel, so we've got 2 circles of children seated or standing. So they have a brief moment to talk to sort of face-to-face child from the outer circle with child from the inner circle, and then when you give the signal, the children move around one place, so they have someone else to talk to. Simplest way, and I'm guaranteeing that you will remember this after, well, I'm not suggesting that you would do this in the classroom, but if you think of it like speed dating, that's the kind of process that we're looking at here. So very good, say, at the start of the year when the class is all new to each other and getting to know each other, find out one thing about each other and then move on, so that after 3 minutes they've had a chance to discuss, to talk to a number of different children that perhaps otherwise they wouldn't necessarily talk to. Okay, what else can we do to support group work? Waiting and turn taking. Useful strategies, giving children thinking time and making it clear that they need thinking time and how to signal this to them. So either using a timer, passing around a talking object, or numbering the children, to pick out a number at random, that sort of thing. It helps to make it clear whose turn it's going to be, and that each child will get a turn. Okay, so that almost brings me to the end of my little bit. So 4 key strategies that we've looked at. I would suggest that you just start with one of these and find ways of working it into your everyday practice until it becomes part of your everyday teaching repertoire. And then when you're confident with that one, go back and have a go at another one. And finally, I'd like to say the single most important resource in the classroom is, of course, you. Consider your own awareness of language, how you use language, the length of the sentences and instructions you use, giving thinking time, and when you're questioning the children, thinking about the purpose of any questions. Talking of which, have we got time for any questions now?
Has anybody got any questions for Jonathan? I have one, Jonathan, if I may.
Yeah.
So why do, in terms of whole school approaches, why do you feel that's so important when we think about Oracy? Why is a whole school approach so important?
Well, it's about the school ethos and the message that the school is trying to get across to the children. So it helps to have a whole school approach because it helps to establish that ethos, that's something that all teachers, teaching assistants, all school staff value. There's also a certain thing about continuity, and so for example I mentioned about comprehension monitoring. Those skills can be started out in reception, so with your good listening skills, and then you build on that across the years until, say, by year 5 or 6, children have that so well embedded, and they've also got very confident with the strategy of asking for clarification. So they've grown up with that as they've gone through the school. That message has been reinforced and supported all the way through. So hopefully that answers your question. It's vitally important to keep it embedded right across the school.
No, absolutely. And do you have any examples of how sort of effective ways of engaging parents with Oracy as well?
Yeah, I think the most useful general strategy is to say little and often. So sharing with parents on a regular basis through kind of spoken language based homeworks, just simple things that they can be doing at home to reinforce your key messages. So and just doing, recommending one strategy each week or each fortnight or however. So for example, stressing to parents, right, make time to listen and discuss things with your child. And then asking, when you ask a question, make sure you pause and let the child think about their answer before you wade in there with follow-up questions and so on. So just for all of those strategies that you share, just giving simple tasks just to practice one at a time, so that they're more familiar, they build up familiarity with them, and they can see how it relates to family life and just getting on with each other in the home environment.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions before I hand over to Becky? Just going to give you just a second.
I've got a question, if that's all right, Natasha.
Yeah, go for it, Iggy.
I was just wondering, with the group structures that you've been through, Jonathan, are there specific group structures that support students with particular types of communication issues? Like, are there certain ones that are particularly useful with certain students, or is the benefit more in mixing it up?
The way I see them is that the structures lend themselves more to particular types of activity rather than particular students. So as I mentioned, the I've got the name of it now. The home groups and the jigsawing, the home groups and the expert groups, more about, if you're setting up a group to do some research on a topic with a view to doing a presentation on it, for example. Snowballing, great for moving the class towards a consensus of opinion, rather than specific children, I think.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, fantastic. Okay. Right, on that note, thank you very much for that, Jonathan. It's really informative. I'm going to hand over to Becky Earnshaw, the Director of Voice 21. Hello, Becky.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I think hopefully everyone can hear you.
Excellent.
Yep.
Awesome.
In terms of, can I just press this, show my screen? Technical difficulties.
There we go, lovely.
Can everyone see me? Excellent. Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. As has been said, I'm Director of Voice 21, which is a part of School 21. And School 21, as some of you may know, is a school in Stratford, East London, that was set up to put Oracy at the heart of everything that we do. And so the school, in its build-up and in its DNA and everything we do, values Oracy speaking at the same level as we do other aspects of literacy, such as reading and writing. So that's had a major effect on how we do things. So I'm going to hopefully give you a very whistle-stop tour through some of the things that we do at School 21 to enable us to put Oracy right at the heart of everything we do, and then leave some time for questions and hopefully a bit of discussion, considering that this is about Oracy, on things, and hopefully have a bit of a chat. So just firstly, and I know that Jonathan shared a lot of this with you, and there will be a little bits of crossover in what we say, so I can whiz through those things because they've been well covered already. But firstly, why did we do that? Why? I can't click on my slide. Oh, there we go. Why did we decide to put Oracy at the heart of everything? I think we come from it from a number of different angles. We see Oracy as something which supports all areas of learning for students. It underpins their achievement in basic skills across the board and also supports and enhances their learning in different subject areas. Our school has a project-based learning curriculum which really enables us to enhance opportunities for Oracy for students through exhibition evenings, etc. But also makes it really important that students can discuss it really well in the development of those projects. So it underpins everything across the curriculum. We also believe very strongly that it's important in terms of social mobility. We know from the data that's been discussed earlier that students from more disadvantaged backgrounds tend to have less high speaking levels in terms of coming into school. And we're very concerned about ensuring that we can prepare our students not only academically with qualifications to go on to thrive in later life, but with the confidence and ability to articulate those ideas that they've developed throughout school and beyond, and to be able to be eloquent in all kinds of situations and contexts, and have the confidence to stand in any room and hold their own, and to be interested and interesting to other people. And we think that students who can talk and share ideas have better well-being, that it's part of developing self-esteem and confidence, and that only by ensuring that our students are able to share their concerns openly in the school, to have really effective conversations with their peers and with other teachers, are they going to truly be well. And that we want them, as I've said, to be able to compete in that really tough global skills market. And if we look at those jobs that are growing in terms of wages, and the jobs that aren't able to be automated by machines, it's those that have really strong social and communicative aspects to the role. So it's those jobs that require people to use every bit of their social skills and things that as yet computers cannot do effectively. So that's the reason we focus on them. At a school that's very much focused on foundations in the 21st century, we think that while speaking maybe an ancient skill, it's something which is going to grow in importance, not less. So what does that look like in terms of what we do? Well, I think fundamentally, and there's lots of things that you will hear about in terms of what we do that you will do at your schools, and that's really important. That that all schools that I've been into have really good elements of Oracy throughout them, but they tend to be quite pocketed potentially, and they may be focused on a particular group of students or in a particular part of the curriculum. I think what perhaps makes us different at School 21 is how comprehensive the offer of Oracy is for all students across the board, and throughout all lessons and embedded throughout the curriculum and all aspects of the school day. And that means that we're very deliberate and explicit about the way that we plan for Oracy and the way that we ensure that we enhance every opportunity and take every opportunity to create spaces for Oracy to happen. We have a dedicated curriculum time for Oracy in Year 7. So Oracy is embedded throughout our primary curriculum, and I'll talk a little bit about what that looks like in Year 7. And because at the moment the school doesn't meet in the middle, we have a primary and secondary. That primary only goes up to Year 3, secondary obviously starts at Year 7, so there's a gap. So we've been recruiting students from outside of our primary school. So in order to ensure that we can kind of get students all up to the same space in terms of understanding what the expectations at School 21 is around Oracy, we've carved out dedicated curriculum time at Year 7 for Oracy lessons. For any of those who are interested, we can share some of what we do in an Oracy lesson, but it's very much around giving students the protocols, the understanding of shared expectations across the school, trialling and using those techniques for talk within the classroom, and developing their confidence as speakers, finding their own voice, and developing the time for them to write their own speeches, to share that, to try different types of conversation, different types of communication in a really risk-free and open space, where that is the point of the lesson, rather than it being somewhere where there's something else being tried to be shoehorned in as well. In terms of that whole school culture of Oracy, we make sure that it permeates all the key components of the school day. I think one of the most important things is the way that we do assemblies. So rather than it being somebody stood at the front talking to students, all our assemblies are done with students sitting in coaching circles, where the lead of the assembly will act as a facilitator and prompting conversation. Students will then break down into lots of different groupings some of which were described by Jonathan. You know, they'll stand in traverses, they'll break down into threes, they may go into an onion or a circle and discuss ideas that are then prompted from the front, and then within those groups they'll be asked to share those ideas back. So students get really used to both talking in and across different groups of themselves, but also presenting back to quite a large number of students in the assembly. The assembly is also a really key point for CPD for staff to develop those techniques around Oracy. It's a way that the facilitator can model different ways of bringing out Oracy, of encouraging students to speak, that other teachers can then take and use in their lessons. Throughout coaching time, which many of you might have as tutor time, we ensure that students are developing those Oracy skills by that being completely discussion based. Our parents' evenings are run by the student coming and presenting to their parent, their coach, and another member of the governors or an external body, and presenting their journey of learning. So again, the emphasis on the student speaking and sharing their story of their learning, which is then probed and discussed in quite a scary process, but a really enlightening one, and one which parents really enjoy because they actually get to hear their child talk about their learning, which, as somebody with children myself, I find is almost impossible to do at times. We also have a real focus on every teacher being an Oracy teacher. So in terms of the job titles at School 21, you will see teachers who have English and Oracy as their job title, or History and Oracy, but the expectation is that all teachers need to use Oracy throughout their lessons, and they'll all be trained when they arrive at the school in doing so. So the expectation is that you can walk into any classroom and at some point in the lesson there will be some really active Oracy going on, and students will be talking in structured and purposeful ways. There's an understood vocabulary of learning around Oracy for the school. We've developed protocols and ways of talking about talking, which enables us all to have a shared understanding of what that means, and so the expectations can be easily understood by both students and staff. That leads into the Oracy framework, which I'll talk about in a moment, which is a way that we organise the curriculum around Oracy, and the way that we think about Oracy in the school to help structure our work around that. As I mentioned before, we have specific professional development for all staff, and I'll talk again a little bit about that later. And we are in the process of developing and enhancing and really shaping our assessment and measurement tool for Oracy. We've got some which I'll show you later in terms of rubrics, etc., but that's something that we're really working on at the moment, to look at how we can really effectively track progress in Oracy and put in interventions for students who are not making satisfactory progress. And that includes students who are very eloquent and very capable at Oracy but could be even better. So you should have in front of you now our Oracy framework. This was developed with University of Cambridge in a project that we did with the Education Endowment Fund a couple of years ago. This is really a way of us understanding all of those different elements that we think make up Oracy within School 21 and beyond. So what are the really important components that students need to be able to grasp, to be able to be effective speakers, and to be eloquent, to share all of the skills that we've talked about earlier. And so we break those down into the physical, which, as you can see, is very much about voice projection, body language, all of those aspects of talk. The linguistics, the use of vocabulary, how they structure and organise that talk, the use of rhetorical techniques. The cognitive side of things, so that's very much about how they structure and express ideas, and how they're able to develop their reasoning through talk, how they're able to convey meaning and intention to others. And then the social and emotional side, which is really around that kind of group work, that understanding of turn taking, all of those things that Jonathan mentioned, but also how you impact and affect an audience. So how can you make a connection with an audience? And so that kind of, we use the Oracy framework will be something that is visible across the school. Everyone understands it, everybody uses it. Students will talk and give critique to each other, saying, you know, at the end of a discussion, you know, physically you're really strong there. I could see that you were listening. Your body language was really open, but cognitively, I felt that, you know, there wasn't a lot in what you said, and your arguments were a bit weak. And that's the kind of feedback we hear student to student around that. And that's obviously in secondary. At primary, this is used to really kind of as a diagnostic tool, often to understand where the students are at, whether you've got a group which is particularly strong in one area or the other. and something that teachers can think about in terms of their planning to make sure they're covering all aspects of this in their lessons. So very much we want to look at creating dialogic classrooms. It's School 21, creating spaces where talk is very central to everything that we do in the classroom, and that it's not just taken by chance, that it's planned in, and it's done in a very deliberate and explicit and thought through way. And that looks like all of these things. So we have lots of opportunities for talk, and we break students down into different sizes of groups, as Jonathan explained, for different purposes. And we find that that's a really great way of getting them to talk to each other, and to talk to different students that they may not naturally gravitate towards, and to really encourage purposeful talk, and to test different aspects of the framework. We make sure that students are really aware of the expectations for talk, so we have non-negotiables around talk, and we make sure that talk is celebrated in the same way that you would celebrate bits of written work. We have a real focus here on the idea of beautiful work, and we believe that, talk where students have developed and honed a speech, for example, that's an example of beautiful work, and we create a lot of fuss at the end of the year and throughout the year around those opportunities for students to express themselves, and those that do that particularly well against a framework, but also those that do that well as a journey. So at the end of each major piece of work, the students will give a presentation to their teacher around that work, and for many students who maybe struggled on other aspects, that's an opportunity for them to pick up points and marks towards their final result by being able to give a really good story of their learning around that project. The talk is modelled and scaffolded, and very heavily scaffolded early on, and I mean, I can share at some point with any of you who are interested in some of the videos of our students talking, the younger pupils talking to each other, and sometimes it does sound a little bit clunky, because they're using scaffolding that's been given to them, sentence stems. So you'll hear them say things like, building on your idea, John, or I would like to challenge you on that. And it's not naturally sometimes language that students of that age might use, but by giving them those stems, it really helps to structure the conversation early on and help them to learn different types of talk for different contexts, and how to ensure that they are genuinely building on somebody else's idea, rather than doing, I think, what a lot of younger students can do, which is giving their own little monologue. So when they say they want to respond to somebody, actually what they're doing is want to tell their point and don't refer to the others. So some of the scaffolding and structures that we use help to prompt them to think about how they actually draw in what somebody else has said, or how they respond effectively. And that language is really explicitly taught, and then when they have talking points throughout the class, there will be bits of language stems, etc., up on the wall. And then again, that final point there about talk being planned. So we try to have a balance of different types of talk, so that we're covering the whole range that we want them to be able to do, and thinking about different contexts and planning in those different contexts for talk, including a lot of work around authentic audiences. So we find that students really raise their game around Oracy, where we have external people in. So we try to create lots of opportunities for them to be talking, not just within school to people that they get used to, but also to people outside of school and people coming in that can really test them in terms of their confidence and ability to express their ideas clearly. So some of the things that we think about a lot, and lots of this, is drawn from the great thinking and evidence that there is around good talk. But we're trying to find a balance between different types of talk throughout school. So I think there's a tendency when we talk about Oracy in School 21, people think that it's all about formal presentations, but very clear that that's one output or one expression of Oracy within the schools. We do ask all students to do presentations at the end of Year 7, Year 8, Year 9, and now as they move through to Year 10, 11, all of our students have to do presentations without notes to an audience, and that's a really big part of school. And equally, as we move through primary and they get to those older age groups, there'll be an expectation there. But we're very aware of the fact that that presentational talk is like a final draft, and as a school we're all about craftsmanship and drafting. So those presentations have had a lot of time put into them, they've been redrafted, they've been critiqued, and students will critique each other, external audiences will come in to do it. But what we need to create lots of space for in the classroom is exploratory talk, where students feel free to share their ideas without necessarily it being as polished as it would be in a presentation. And I think we need to, as teachers, you need to think about when the right places for exploratory talk is, really open discussion, where students may change their ideas as they continue to talk, where there's lots of space for people to discuss and to be open and to not be able to finish an idea but start one, etc. And that more formal types of talk, and make sure that you're not confusing the two too much, because I think that can put pressure on students and can also knock the confidence of some students. As been talked about before, we use lots of different types of grouping. This is just some of the ones, and we've had this discussion before. I think I remember Jonathan used a different sort of description. We call it the onion here, and then the traverse. And so, for example, like some of our students talking in the traverse, you will see if you walk around School 21 and dip in a lesson, you'll see lots of these different structures being used, and equally in assemblies. All of the students are being kind of trained so very quickly they can get themselves into those. So if you say get into the onion, they can move very quickly and organise themselves in that with minimal fuss. And we find that that it doesn't cause any disruption. It's something that they become very used to doing and very adept at doing, and something that helps to keep the pace of the lesson and keep them engaged. We also expect students to demonstrate lots of proof of listening, and teachers will talk about proof of listening in lessons, and students will be challenged around it if they're not demonstrating that, both by the teacher but also, more importantly, by each other. And they're also, in terms of, and this was mentioned before, Jonathan, we look at the different roles that students may play, and often try and create opportunities for students to take on a role within a talk. So we may, in a discussion, get them to say, right, you in this one, you're going to be the instigator, you're going to be the builder, you'll be the challenger, and help them to perhaps take on roles which aren't their natural, their natural inclination, or to think about what are the skills that are required in taking on these different roles. So obviously, as a summariser, the listening skills need to be really, really strong. They need to make sure that they are listening and inclusive of all in the discussion. A challenger, very high cognitive input. So we ask them to kind of think about what might be required in those different roles, and to, in the end, analyse what role they may have played in that discussion. If they haven't been given a formal role, have a think about what role they actually played. And I think that's a really useful way of getting that kind of metacognition, if you like, about their talk, getting them to step outside themselves and think about the discussion. And we get students to map discussions as well, so they get a really strong sense of how talk happened, how good discussion happened, and where people are perhaps dominating a discussion, for example. And we do have little red cards and things that they will use to self-regulate the discussion if they feel like that somebody's taking over or somebody isn't contributing. This is just some of the questions that we kind of ask in terms of thinking about planning for talk in your classroom. Thinking about how you measure the success of that talk and get that balance between different types of talk. These are the kind of things our teachers will think about when they're planning lessons or projects across the school. I'm flicking through very quickly because I actually want to get to the talking bit otherwise. And then this is we're looking at different types of ways of measuring progression in Oracy. So we're testing a few different models. We have got some formal assessment tools that we've developed with Cambridge that we've been using to baseline students and look at their development on from that. We're also really interested in that kind of how you understand it in terms of that kind of progression based on the model that we use in school, which is Apprentice Developing Competent Expert. This kind of rubric style models. And also we're looking at kind of foundation stage for some of our students who maybe need to focus on a few elements of the framework rather than taking the whole thing. And so looking at, say, particular skills like clarity of speech or structure, some tools to kind of really focus in on those. But these are, if you go throughout our classrooms, you will see this kind of rubric that teachers will use to kind of get a sense of where the students are and where they need to push them to, each of them, to get to the next level. I said earlier that all of our teachers run that have CPD on Oracy. At the beginning, for all new teachers, that looks like a kind of a training program that we could, that we could deliver in any school, if you like, where we take them through all of the elements of the program and really get them to think about themselves as a speaker and as a leader of Oracy in their classroom and how they model that. Thinking about their own voice and really finding their voice as a teacher, and thinking about how they share that. Once you've had teachers who've been here a while, we ask them to do a research project into Oracy and we've started publishing those, so if any of you are interested, you can read some of the research that was done last term, just little in-class research projects that teachers took on an area that was of interest to them around Oracy, and they're published in a journal that we put online, which is beautifulworksjournal.com. You can have a look. There's a mixture of Oracy research and project-based learning research in there, but I think it just demonstrates kind of how much we're asking teachers to really consider and refine and critique their own practice around Oracy, and really think about how they can push their own boundaries around it, and how we can make sure that we don't kind of rest on our laurels on it, but continually thinking about it in the way that you would reading or writing, and those things that have been very central to curriculum for such a long time. I won't go into any detail on this, just to say that at the moment we're looking at how we can take our work out to other schools, so that's very much what Voice 21 is about. It's about a campaign really to look at how we can get more schools doing more Oracy and putting it higher up in terms of the status within their curriculum and the expectations of their students. We've got another Education Endowment Fund project, which we're just recruiting schools for at the moment. That's for year 7 this time round. And we're really, we've been working with a number of schools to look at how we can share our learning both at secondary and primary around that. So if anyone was interested in talking to us around that, we'd really love to discuss, what you want to do and how we can potentially help. We've got a load of resources, and we're just refining this at the moment. We've got a load of resources on the Voice 21 website. The things were put up a little while ago, so some of them we need refreshed and some of them need added to, and we're in the process of doing that now. But as a starting point, it's somewhere to have a bit of a delve around and see if there's anything that grabs you, and some of the ideas, all of the things that I've mentioned today, the work on and our resources on, or bits of inspiration. There's loads of videos on there as well, which might give you a bit of an indication of what it looks like in practice in School 21, and some of our teachers talking about it in terms of how they responded to that idea of putting Oracy at the heart of what they do. And that's me. So yeah, I just wanted to throw it open to anybody for questions, or if there's any points of discussion. I've certainly got things I could throw out, but I'd be really interested to hear from you in terms of if there's anything that you would like to know more about, or anything that doesn't make sense, or any challenges or critiques you've got for us around what I've shared with you now.
Thank you very much, Becky. I'm going to take people one by one that I can see are online, just to see if they've got any questions, just from anything that Becky's just said, or again any reflections from Jonathan. Sarah, do you have any questions at all? No? Laura?
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
Oh. Yeah. Hi, yes, we can hear you.
Hello. Hi, yeah, I've got quite a few questions. I wanted to ask, you mentioned, it's obviously a question for Becky, you mentioned about training your staff, the whole staff. How would you recommend, or how is it best to do that?
Well, we didn't have there wasn't a kind of off-the-shelf model that we felt fitted with what we do, so we developed our own. Being really happy to share what that looks like. It's quite an involved process, because I think one of the things around Oracy, and I think one of the reasons that perhaps it isn't embraced as much as we would like it to be, is that it's quite exposing for teachers. It's quite, because you have to model it, and unlike say literature where you can point to great works, in Oracy you're kind of it when you're stood in front of that classroom, and so a lot of the work is giving teachers the confidence around some of the techniques and tools that we use, so that they feel able to model that really effective and eloquent talk, and to challenge students around that. A lot of it's about them kind of looking at them, like thinking about themselves as a speaker, which again is something that we just don't really do. We very rarely that people have had a really effective critique on them as in their speaking style, and most people get to adulthood and that hasn't happened. So it's really quite a full-on exposing process. But I think something that's really, having gone through it, our teachers really value it, and having gone through it, I think it kind of, a lot of them have talked about how it's made a massive shift in their teaching practice. Yeah. And even the really experienced teachers, then having done that, it's massively shifted their practice. We'll be really happy to share kind of what that looks like in terms of the modules and units that are involved. But it is something that you've got to kind of, we've had to put time into and carve time out of people's CPD to really invest in that, because you know, if we believe in the students that Oracy is something that's taught, not caught, we kind of have to have the same view with the teachers as they come in.
Yeah, that would be brilliant if you could share anything, because I'm struggling a little bit at the moment. I'm a literacy coordinator, and a lot of our staff, they just really struggle. They can't. I mean, they know they have to develop students' vocabulary and how they articulate answers, but they find that really Oracy doesn't really play a part in a lot of their subjects. So
yeah,
that would be great if you could share that. So I really want to try and change mindsets if I can.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting actually, because one of the things that's been, I think, particularly successful is that looking at how you can embed it across subject areas and looking at some of the subjects where people would naturally think that it wouldn't play as big a part, so like maths and science and those subjects. And actually we find now that some of our biggest advocates within School 21 are those teachers in those departments, because A, it's helped really, for them, it's opened up areas of teaching that perhaps they hadn't had the opportunity to explore before, and it really helped them to develop their practice around those areas. But for some of them, it's been a breakthrough around particularly difficult areas to teach in their subject. So maths talk a lot about how important Oracy has been to support problem solving. And in the new maths curriculum, there's a really heavy focus on problem solving, and that ability for students to, because our students have had that sort of support and training around talk, and being able to break down ideas and discuss really effectively together and come to shared consensus around things, etc., and challenge effectively. They found that's been a really strong focus within the maths lesson and really helped to move them on in terms of problem solving. So if some of your more reluctant teachers, perhaps you can, you know, match them up with some of our teachers who are Oracy converts, to be able to persuade them.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah. Great, yes, still can.
I thought I'd gone off. Yeah, that's great. And if you could share anything, that would also be brilliant. I also wanted to ask. Obviously, you measure achievement in Oracy as well. How often does each individual subject do that, or is that part of your the curriculum that you use with Year 7? How do you do that? Is it individual subjects or and how often as well?
A bit of both. So it forms part of individual subjects in terms of those as to the final the outcomes of their work. They'll have an Oracy element to that, and that'll be part of the assessment, if you like. But it's also done through coaching, and so as I say, students will work towards kind of Oracy. I don't want to say outputs is the wrong word, but you know, products, if you like, through their coaching time beyond Year 7 as well. So whilst they have the dedicated Oracy lesson in Year 7, that coaching time is used in Year 8, Year 9, 10 to really help to develop and hone and refine and upskill their Oracy. So it doesn't just stop in Year 7 and then it's just throughout the curriculum. There is focus throughout the coaching time on Oracy. And then, as I say, at the moment we're looking at how we can really get a really meaningful measure of progress on Oracy, because I think that's one of the concerns. You know, we want to make sure that it is meaningful, that it's actually looking at the things that which we value around Oracy rather than something which is just for the sake of getting a number at the end of it. And so we've got a number of we've got sort of teams teachers looking at that and testing out different models at the moment, so that we can have we'd like to be able to obviously see from us coming in at 4 to going out. We're opening a 6th form in 2017, so you know, have them through to 18, to have that from 4 to 18, and what does that each stage, what does that progress look like in School 21, and how can we be confident that we're boosting them beyond what they would do if they hadn't got the amount of focus that they're getting. And so again, you know, we're in the process of developing that, but very keen to work with those schools around that, and really happy to talk to you and share anything that we've got.
Great. I just want to at this point say we've got about 5 minutes left on the webinar. So Laura, can I ask you to ask, have you got any more questions, sorry?
No, just one more thing I don't want to ask another question.
Go for it.
Did Becky, you mentioned some videos that you have for modelling the different types of talk. Are they on the Voice 21 website?
Yes, they are. But if there's anything that you can't find, let me know, because we've got loads of other ones that we haven't yet uploaded. So, and we're just in the process as part of the Education Endowment Fund project that we're doing now. We're just in the process of updating those. And so, if there's anything that you think, oh, it would be really useful to have X, and we haven't got it, then give me a shout, because we might be able to pull it together.
Yeah, that's great. And am I able to have the slides from today? Just I didn't get everything down, and it would be great if I could just have a look back and make sure that brilliant.
Yes, so after
I'm assuming be able to.
The webinar, we will, I will rather email out today's webinar, which is being recorded, so you can certainly share it with your colleagues in school, and we'll be emailing out the slideshows as well. So
lovely, thank you.
Sorry, can I just ask
No
what school
problem.
you're from? Sorry.
I'm from Belmont in Durham.
Yeah, sorry. I just left the Northeast recently, so I spotted the accent, so it's
can I at this point invite Jonathan, our from a school, Jonathan, just to see if he's got any questions for either Becky or Jonathan Wright?
I was actually thinking about whether you've got an example of how this can be incorporated into science. I know you've mentioned about it being questionable for science teachers, but me looking through it, it reminds me of active listening courses I've been on in the past, and also how we can incorporate to the definite practical activities.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I'll struggle to think off the top of my head of a direct example of science that I've seen recently, but I could certainly, but it's kind of, they do it every day. We don't, it's something which is planned into all lessons, and I think we've done a lot of work around at the beginning of using Harkness discussion at the beginning of projects, for example, for students to get a sense of where students' understanding is really at of a scientific topic, for example, at the very beginning, then bringing it back to that partway through to be able to see how that knowledge is developed, and then moving to something which is it's more debate-led potential at the end of students taking a different part of a hypothesis or whatever, and being able to challenge each other around it using the evidence that they've pulled together in a science lesson. But what I could do, we've got teachers here who would be able to show you much more detail around their kind of planning around a topic, for example, and showing the ways that they've integrated Oracy into a science topic. And again, we'd be more than happy to share that with you so you can.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant. I mean, obviously, if it can be incorporated.
Maybe talk to the science specialist because it's not my specialism.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if it can be incorporated into written language as well, that'd be obviously even better, because obviously the coursework has now been dropped from science, and it's all the written exams at the end of the year, unfortunately.
Well, I think that's one of the really important things that when we talk about, and I think Jonathan touched on it a lot as well, that in order for students to organise their thoughts, to be able to, to have their language and their vocabulary pushed, then the really effective talk can really support good writing, and
yes.
Particularly in something like science, where when we talk about context, we talk about in the linguistic strands of the Oracy framework. That's very much about them using the appropriate language in appropriate settings. So we expect our students in science to talk like scientists, to use scientific language, and we'll challenge them about that. So it's not about them just having like words all the time. It's about them using the right language and really developing the language and pushing up the different tiers of language that are used for those subjects. And so I think that the constant use of discussion around scientific language and them using it, having to take it on, being challenged around it, really strengthens their writing when it comes to the exams and being able to express those ideas clearly on paper.
Yeah, definitely.
And if I could just add in there as well, I mean, it is very much an example of a way that you would be using talk to practice what it is you want to say. So it's talking for writing. So they talk with each other and discuss their ideas, how to explain a process or their observations from an experiment or something. And then, once they've rehearsed that orally, then it makes it easier for them to write it down.
I mean, an example I can think of that I wouldn't mind probably a bit of hand structuring would be how I could actually speak when I'm conducting a demonstration for the students to then write about later.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that kind of effective talk between them, that discussion that you can prompt in something like science, opens them up to different ways of thinking about something that they wouldn't have had on their own. So it expands the pool of understanding that they can draw upon, and also helps you as a teacher to recognise when they've really got something, because if they can explain it to another student effectively and clearly, then they've understood it. And that's often a really good way of, and not only are they sharing their knowledge, you also for you getting sort of proof of understanding within that.
Yes.
Okay,
No worries,
thank you very
thank you.
much, Jonathan. Can we just finish by thinking about what actions that we can take as a network to really promote Oracy? I just wondered if I could invite Jonathan Wright and Becky Earnshaw just to comment on that.
Oh. Well, I'm sorry, Jonathan, I'm jumping in, please.
Go for it.
I think that one of the things that feels like there's lacking within the Oracy space, if you like, and having talked to quite a lot of teachers in the last few months, having taken on this job, and I'm sure Jonathan's talked to many, many more over the time he's been working in this field, it doesn't feel like there's the space is necessarily for teachers to have that professional conversation around Oracy in the way that has been more developed around their other areas of literacy, and so, you know, that whole education, providing that opportunity for teachers to really share practice and discuss that, but to push each other's practice and to critique and challenge, and to have professional conversations about what are reasonable expectations in Oracy, what, you know, how would you intervene, etc. You know, that to create a space for that, I think would be really valuable, because there's lots of people who have come across who are very passionate about this and who are trying within their schools to incorporate it, but perhaps not the spaces for them to come together and to do that on a wider scale.
Okay, thank you very much, Becky. And Jonathan?
Yeah, I suppose on a very practical level, and one thing that everyone could take a look at, one of our partner organisations, the Communication Trust, run a kind of programme called the Communication Commitment. It's something that schools can just voluntarily sign up for, and it just gives you some pointers of things across different aspects, so within school leadership and management, through curriculum, and various other sort of key areas, and you sign up to making a commitment to change something in one of those areas, and there are lots of resources on their website to help schools do that. And I think the message, just reinforcing what Becky said there, it's about trying to get it on the agenda as a whole school issue and moving it forward as a whole school to decide where you are currently and what you need to develop further. So yeah, if you just look up the communicationtrust.org, you'll find the communication commitment on their website.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much. We've run out of time. Can I just take this opportunity to thank all the schools that have joined us for the webinar today. I'm sure you've all found it incredibly useful, I hope. So after this webinar, we will be sending, as I say, around all the resources and try and connect you all together. And can I thank very much Becky Earnshaw from Voice 21 and Jonathan Wright from ICANN. Thank you very much, everyone, and see you again soon. Okay, bye.
Bye. Thanks.